In this episode, we're going to make mobile troubleshooting feel much less confusing by focusing on the kinds of problems users report most often and the simple thinking steps technicians use to sort them out. Phones and tablets are supposed to feel easy, so when apps crash, updates fail, a device keeps rebooting, the connection keeps dropping, or the battery drains far too fast, users often feel frustrated very quickly because the device is part of daily life. For beginners, the good news is that these problems are easier to handle when you stop treating them like one giant mystery and start asking what changed, when the symptom appears, and whether the issue seems tied to one app, the whole device, or the way the device is being used. A technician does not need to guess wildly or jump to the most dramatic answer. Most mobile software problems become clearer when you look at timing, scope, and what kind of fix makes sense first, whether that means adjusting settings, updating software, clearing app data, or removing the app entirely. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A strong first habit in mobile troubleshooting is to figure out whether the problem belongs to one app, several apps, or the device as a whole. If one game crashes, but every other app works normally, that points in one direction. If many apps freeze, the phone restarts randomly, and the device gets hot, that points somewhere else. Beginners often focus only on the most annoying symptom and miss the pattern around it. But the pattern is what helps separate a small app problem from a wider system problem. A technician should ask simple questions such as when the trouble started, whether it began after an update, whether it happens only on one network, whether the battery drain appeared suddenly, and whether the device feels slow even when no major app is open. Those questions matter because mobile devices mix apps, network access, battery use, storage limits, and system updates so tightly that one symptom can seem bigger than it really is unless you first decide how broad the problem actually is. App instability is one of the most common mobile complaints, and it usually shows up as crashing, freezing, refusing to open, or behaving strangely after the user has already been using the app normally for days or weeks. For a beginner, the main lesson is that unstable apps are often not a sign that the entire phone is broken. Sometimes the problem really is narrow. One app may have bad stored data, may not agree well with a recent system change, may have a bug introduced by its latest version, or may be asking the device to do more than that device handles well. A technician should listen for whether the issue is tied closely to one app and whether the rest of the phone still feels healthy. If messages open fine, the browser works, calls are normal, and only one social media or business app keeps failing, then the best thinking starts with that app rather than with the whole operating system. Narrow symptoms usually deserve a narrow first response instead of a full device-level panic. Updates are another major source of mobile trouble because they change the environment the apps depend on. And when that change does not go smoothly, the user often notices right away. A recent update may affect the app itself, the device operating system, OS, or both. For beginners, the easiest way to think about update-related trouble is to ask whether the symptom began soon after something changed. If the phone worked well yesterday, updated overnight, and now one app crashes every time it opens, the update becomes a meaningful clue. That does not mean updates are bad or should be avoided. It means recent change matters in troubleshooting. A technician should look for timing before guessing at deeper causes. Many mobile problems feel mysterious only because nobody asked the user whether an app update, a system update, a new permission request, or a settings change happened right before the trouble started. Once that timeline becomes clear, the next step usually becomes much easier to choose. At the same time, not every update-related complaint is caused by the update alone. Sometimes the update exposes a weakness that was already growing in the background, such as low storage, old app data, poor network conditions, or a device that was already running close to its limits. For beginners, this matters because it prevents oversimplified thinking. A user may say the update ruined the phone, but the real story may be that the device had almost no free space left, too many apps running in the background, or several old apps competing for the same resources. The update may simply have been the moment when those problems became visible. A technician should stay calm here. Recent change is still a good clue, but it is not always the whole answer. The better approach is to ask what changed and then look at whether the device also shows signs of strain, such as slow response, heat, storage pressure, or poor battery behavior, because those details help explain whether the problem is truly about one update or about a device that is already under stress. Reboot cycles can feel especially alarming because users often take them as proof that the whole phone is dying. But the first job for a beginner technician is to decide whether the device is fully stuck in a repeating restart problem or whether it only reboots occasionally during certain activity. A phone that restarts only when one specific app opens gives a very different clue from a phone that keeps restarting before the user can do anything at all. That difference matters because the first case suggests an app-level trigger or a software conflict, while the second case points more toward a broader system issue. A technician should pay attention to when the reboot happens, whether the user can reach the home screen, and whether the behavior started after an update, app install, or major settings change. Those details help reduce guesswork. Reboot problems become easier to understand when you separate random-seeming restarts during use from repeatable restarts tied to startup or tied to one specific action. When a device reboots during a specific task, the task itself becomes part of the clue. If the reboot happens only during video calls, a certain game, or one heavy business app, that suggests the phone may be struggling with that workload or that app rather than failing at a deeper basic level every minute of the day. For beginners, this is useful because it shows how mobile troubleshooting often depends on noticing triggers. A phone that restarts only after a camera-heavy app opens is telling a different story than one that reboots while sitting idle on a desk. The technician should think about what the reboot is connected to. Is it a demanding app, a recent update, a background sync process, or something else that pushes the device harder than normal? If the trigger can be identified, the response can be much more focused. That may mean looking at app updates, permissions, stored data, or removal of one unstable app rather than immediately blaming the whole device or assuming the battery itself is bad. Connectivity failures are another large category, and they become much easier to troubleshoot when you first ask what kind of connection is failing. Users often say the phone has no internet, but that can mean several very different things. It might mean the wireless connection drops, mobile data is weak, one app cannot reach its service, or the phone is connected to a network but still cannot load content reliably. Beginners should understand that connection problems are not all the same problem wearing different clothes. A technician has to ask whether the issue affects one app or all apps, one network or every network, and whether the problem is constant or only appears in certain places or at certain times. Those questions matter because the wrong assumption can send troubleshooting in the wrong direction. A browser failing everywhere is different from a video app failing only on one wireless network, and both are different from a phone that shows connection bars but cannot sync messages properly. A very common beginner mistake is assuming that every connection problem must be fixed by changing the network first. Sometimes that is correct, but sometimes the device or the app is the real issue. If the phone connects well to other wireless networks and only one app still struggles, then the network may not be the main problem at all. If the app fails on both wireless and mobile data, then the pattern points even more strongly toward the app, its settings, or its stored data. A technician should think about whether the connection failure follows the location, follows the app, or follows the device no matter where it goes. That simple thinking helps separate weak signal or poor local network conditions from software behavior on the device itself. It also helps avoid needless changes. Beginners often want one magic button to restore connectivity, but the better path is to decide whether the failure belongs to the network path, the app's behavior, or the broader system's ability to use its connections correctly. Battery drain is one of the most common mobile complaints because users notice it all day long, and it can make the whole phone feel unreliable even when the device still works in most other ways. For beginners, the key lesson is that battery drain is not always caused by a bad battery alone. Sometimes the battery itself is aging, but very often the rapid drain is tied to software behavior, background activity, connection hunting, a bright display, location use, heavy syncing, or one app that is working far harder than the user realizes. A technician should listen for whether the drain appeared suddenly or slowly over time. A slow long-term decline may point more toward normal battery aging, while a sharp sudden change often suggests an app update, system update, settings change, or background process that began using far more power than before. The timing matters because battery complaints often sound like hardware trouble when the real cause is a software or settings issue that changed the device's workload. Heat and battery drain also often travel together, and that gives the technician another useful clue. A phone that gets hot while the battery falls quickly is often doing more work than it should be, whether because of background syncing, constant location checks, unstable apps, poor signal causing repeated connection attempts, or high-demand activity that never settles down. For beginners, the point is not to become obsessed with every warm phone. The point is to notice when the heat matches abnormal drain and does not fit the user's normal pattern of use. If the device is hot while idle, something may be running in the background that should not be. If the drain happens mostly in one location, poor signal may be forcing the phone to work harder to stay connected. These details matter because they help the technician decide whether the next best step is to adjust settings, update software, clear an app's data, or remove the app that seems to be driving the device too hard. Adjusting settings is usually one of the best early responses when the symptom seems tied more to device behavior than to one clearly broken app. For example, if battery drain is strongly linked to high brightness, constant location services, background refresh, or aggressive syncing, then changing those settings makes more sense than removing random apps right away. If a user complains that the phone feels busy all the time and the battery disappears quickly, the technician should think about which settings are letting the device do too much work all day long. Beginners should see settings adjustments as a way to reduce strain when the device is not necessarily broken but is configured in a way that keeps it constantly active. This is especially useful when the symptom is broad but not catastrophic. A phone that still works yet drains too fast, overheats, or struggles with background activity may respond well to sensible settings changes before stronger actions are needed. Updating software is the better choice when the symptom lines up closely with known bugs, compatibility problems, or fixes that the app developer or device maker may already have addressed. If an app is crashing because its version no longer works well with the current OS, or if the device itself is missing a patch that improves stability, then updating is not just maintenance. It becomes part of the repair. For beginners, this matters because some users avoid updates out of frustration, even when the update is exactly what could solve the current symptom. A technician should look for situations where the app version is old, the device software is behind, or the problem began after one side updated while the other side did not. Mobile systems depend on apps and the OS working together smoothly. When that relationship gets out of step, crashes, connectivity trouble, and odd behavior become more likely. Updating is the right choice when the best clue points toward compatibility and known fixes rather than toward bad stored data or one deeply unstable app. Clearing app data is most helpful when one app appears damaged, overloaded with bad stored information, or stuck in a state that normal closing and reopening does not fix. Beginners should think of app data as the saved working memory of that app on the device, including settings, temporary information, and other stored content that helps it run faster or remember past activity. Sometimes that stored material becomes part of the problem. The app may freeze, fail to sync, refuse to open correctly, or keep making the same mistake every time it launches because the bad state is saved and loaded again and again. In those cases, clearing the app's data can give it a fresh start. This option makes the most sense when the trouble is narrow, repeatable, and closely tied to one app that otherwise should work on that device. It is more targeted than wiping the whole phone, and it is often more useful than changing broad settings when the real fault appears to live inside one app's stored state. Removing the app becomes the stronger next step when the app remains unstable after more limited actions or when the app itself is clearly the source of repeated trouble. If one app crashes constantly, drains the battery, causes the device to overheat, or behaves badly across multiple attempts to update and clear its data, then leaving it in place may only keep the problem alive. For beginners, uninstalling an app should not feel like a failure. It is sometimes the cleanest and safest way to break the cycle. A technician should especially consider removal when the app is non-essential, recently installed, poorly rated for stability, or no longer supported well. If the device becomes more stable the moment that app is gone, that result also teaches something important about the cause. Removing the app is the right answer when the symptoms keep following that app and narrower fixes have not restored normal behavior. Sometimes the most practical solution is to stop asking a bad app to behave better and simply take it off the device. Good mobile troubleshooting also depends on moving from the least disruptive reasonable step to the more disruptive steps only when the symptom pattern justifies it. Beginners often want to jump straight to the biggest action because they feel pressure to solve the problem fast, but a better technician works in order. If the pattern points to settings strain, adjust settings first. If the problem fits a likely software bug or version mismatch, update first. If one app appears stuck in a bad state, clear its data first. If the app remains the problem after that, remove it. This order is helpful because it protects the user's time and data while still moving steadily toward a fix. It also teaches the technician to match the action to the symptom instead of using the same answer for every complaint. A phone that loses battery fast does not always need the same response as a phone that reboots in one app, and neither one should be treated exactly like a phone that cannot maintain a connection to any service at all. As we close, the biggest lesson is that mobile app problems become much easier when you sort them by scope, timing, and likely cause instead of treating every bad symptom like proof that the whole phone is failing. If one app is unstable, start by thinking about that app. If the trouble began after a change, use that timing clue. If the phone reboots, ask what triggers it. If connectivity fails, decide whether the issue belongs to the app, the network, or the whole device. If the battery drains too quickly, look for software behavior, background activity, and settings before assuming the battery itself is the only explanation. Then choose the response that fits the evidence. Adjust settings when the device is working too hard. Update software when compatibility or bug fixes are the best clue. Clear app data when one app seems stuck in a bad state. And remove the app when it keeps causing trouble after smaller fixes have failed. That is the simple, calm process that helps beginners troubleshoot mobile devices with much better judgment.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.